The road is dry, the sky is boring, the kind of afternoon where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. One driver is doing everything right. Speed limit, both hands, eyes forward. The other driver is doing something dumb, glancing at a notification, drifting a little, treating physics like it's negotiable. Then the same thing happens to both of them. A kid runs into the street. No warning, no cinematic slow motion, just a blur of color and a body where your brain insists there shouldn't be one. Both drivers slam the brakes. Both hearts jump into their throats. Both cars make that ugly, desperate sound of rubber trying to rewrite time. And here's the part nobody wants to sit with. One driver stops in time, the other doesn't. Same split second, same human reaction, same helplessness, different outcome. Now tell me who's worse. Because your gut is already choosing. Your stomach has already picked a villain. You can feel it, right? That animal part of you that wants the world to make sense, that wants the universe to keep receipts. But the universe doesn't keep receipts, we do, and we call it justice. This is where moral luck enters the room like smoke under a door. The idea that morality, blame, guilt, praise, punishment, gets contaminated by outcomes we don't fully control. That two people can make the same choice, with the same level of care, and be judged differently because reality rolled different dice. Criminal law pretends it can keep morality clean. Like a surgeon scrubbing hands before an operation, it says, we'll look at your intent, your recklessness, your negligence. We'll measure what was in your control. We'll separate the person from the accident. But then the body hits the pavement and suddenly everyone forgets what they promised. Because outcomes are loud. Outcomes scream. Intent whispers. In a courtroom, we try to be rational. We build categories like fences, reasonable person, foreseeability, proximate cause. We build little moral measuring cups. We try to pour human chaos into neat containers. And still, if one driver goes home shaken and the other goes home to a police officer's hand on the shoulder, we don't treat them the same. We can't. The world won't let us. Retributive justice, the ancient itch to make suffering answer suffering, feeds on the outcome like it's protein. Retribution doesn't just want accountability. It wants balance. It wants to feel that the universe is symmetrical. It wants the pain to go somewhere, like electricity needing a ground. So the question becomes less, what did you control? And more, what happened because of you? Control versus consequence. And consequence wins in the human nervous system almost every time. Here's a micro scene you've lived even if you don't realize it. You're in the office kitchen. Somebody left the sponge in the sink like a dead animal. You rinse your mug, you set it down, it slips, it shatters. Now if it was your mug, you feel annoyed. If it was the company mug, you feel mildly embarrassed. But if it was your co-worker's mug, the one they got from their late grandfather, suddenly you're not just clumsy. Suddenly you're a monster in your own head. Same action, different consequence. Your brain doesn't care that gravity did what gravity does. It cares that a story got ruined. That's the first truth. We are story creatures. And guilt is often just the emotional tax we pay when a story turns ugly and our hands are anywhere on the page. Psychologists have mapped pieces of this. People consistently judge harmful outcomes more harshly than identical choices that don't lead to harm, even when the decision process was the same. And when people cause harm by accident, they often feel more guilt than logic says they deserve. That's not a character flaw. That's the architecture of the human mind, built to survive in tribes where outcomes could mean exile. You don't just carry your intention, you carry what your intention touched. Now, criminal law tries to draw a line between a mistake and a tragedy. It separates mens rea from actus reus, mind from action, intention from event. It says, you're not always guilty just because something bad happened near you. We need blameworthiness. We need a wrongful mental state. Purpose, knowledge, recklessness, negligence, something we can point to as yours. That's the clean version. But the messy version is that law is not only a system of fairness, it's a system of social soothing. A community looks at a crushed life and asks for a ritual, a response, a way to signal, we saw this and we are not numb, we are not powerless, we are not letting the universe get away with it. So even when the driver did everything right, there's still a hunger in the room. Not always for punishment, but for meaning. And meaning is where remorse shows up. Remorse is a weird thing. It's not just guilt. It's guilt plus a moral mirror. It's your conscience sitting you down like an exhausted parent and saying, "Look at what happened. Look again. Don't you dare look away." But here's the twist. Remorse doesn't always require wrongdoing. Sometimes remorse is just the mind refusing to accept randomness. Sometimes remorse is your soul trying to take responsibility for an outcome, because the alternative is worse. Admitting the world can shatter innocent things without asking permission. This is where agent regret comes in. Agent regret is that indelible stain you feel, not because you made a mistake, but because you were the agent, the person through whom the tragedy passed. You were the door the disaster walked through, even if you held the door closed as hard as you could, even if it wasn't your fault, even if the universe could honestly testify on your behalf. Agent regret is the kind of regret that doesn't say, "I did wrong." It says, "I was there. It was through me. My hands touched the moment, and now my life will always have that texture in it." It's not moral guilt in the legal sense. It's existential guilt in the human sense. It's the feeling of having your name stitched into a catastrophe, even if you didn't sow it. And if you've never felt it in a dramatic way, you felt it in miniature. You're texting someone you care about. They're having a rough day. You see the message, you think, "I'll respond in a minute," and you don't. Later, you find out they spiraled, not into anything forbidden or graphic, just into that grey fog, that emotional basement where people sit and rehearse their worst thoughts. And you weren't the cause. You didn't build their pain. But your silence becomes a hook in your ribs anyway, because you were adjacent, because you were part of the timeline, because you could imagine a version where your reply landed like a small flashlight. Agent regret is the mind doing trauma accounting in a spreadsheet. If I had been 1 degree different. It's you trying to bargain with fate. Now moral luck says, sometimes you get judged for things outside your control. But agent regret says something even darker. Sometimes you judge yourself for things outside your control, and you do it voluntarily. Why? Because the human ego has a secret addiction. Control. Even bad control. Even painful control. If you can convince yourself you could have prevented it, then the world isn't random. The world is just a test you failed. And weirdly, that feels safer than a world where disaster is a stray dog that bites whoever is closest. This is why people replay accidents in their heads like a cursed GIF. This is why they remember details with unnatural precision. This is why they can describe the angle of sunlight like it was carved into their skull. Your mind is trying to build a machine that makes the past predictable. But the past is not a machine. It's a storm. So we end up in this moral paradox. Criminal law wants to be objective. It wants to punish choices, not bad luck. It wants to focus on control. That's why in many systems, attempt is still a crime, because the intent and the dangerous choice matters even if the outcome doesn't land. It's an attempt to say, morality isn't roulette. And yet, sentencing, public perception, even prosecutors' decisions often bend under the gravity of outcome. Because a dead child is not a thought experiment. It's a broken universe in miniature. So we wobble, we say we punish intent, but we feel the outcome. That wobble is the human condition. Here's the trapdoor moment, the part that changes how you see the scales of justice. We don't just punish to prevent future harm. We punish to manage our fear of randomness. When something terrible happens, the community wants a reason, a lever, a villain, something that makes it feel like the world has edges again. If the driver did nothing wrong and still a kid dies, then what does that mean for you? It means you could be careful and still become a headline. It means you could be good and still be the instrument of a nightmare. And that's unbearable. So we do what humans always do when faced with cosmic chaos. We make a moral story. We tighten the net around the agent. We act like consequence reveals character. We act like the universe only punishes the deserving. Because if we don't act like that, then the street outside your house becomes a slot machine. And nobody wants to live in a casino they can't leave. This is also why remorse can become performative in the legal world. People want remorse to be visible, measurable, almost transactional. If you look sorry enough, maybe the system feels balanced again. If you look cold, the system gets scared. If you don't feel it, then it could happen again. But agent regret doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like avoiding eye contact. Sometimes it looks like a person whose nervous system has turned into a locked room. And sometimes, this is the cruelest part, agent regret looks like punishment. People punish themselves privately even when the law can't. They quit their jobs. They stop driving. They avoid laughter like it's disrespectful. They let their life shrink because they don't feel permitted to be alive in a world where someone else didn't get to continue. Now, if you want to disrupt your own scales of justice, you have to hold two truths at once without flinching. Truth 1. Outcomes matter. They matter socially, emotionally, existentially. A tragedy changes the world. It can't be treated like a harmless near miss just because the decision process was identical. Truth 2. Outcomes are not the whole moral story. If we judge people entirely by the splash they make when the universe throws them, then we're not doing justice. We're doing superstition. We're worshipping consequence like a god. So what do we do with guilt psychology? With that heavy feeling that shows up even when you didn't choose the ending? You don't get rid of it. Not cleanly. Not with a motivational quote. Not with a neat little therapy sentence that tastes like plastic. But you can do something more honest. You can metabolize it. Here are 3 exits. Not doors out of the building. More like ways to stop bleeding on the carpet. First exit. Separate fault from membership. Fault is about your choices. Membership is about being part of the event. Agent regret is membership grief. It says, I was part of the disaster's cast. That's real, that's human. That doesn't automatically mean you were at fault. When the mind collapses those two, it turns membership into a crime. And then you start prosecuting yourself with evidence that wouldn't hold up in any fair court. So practice this sentence, not like a mantra, like a diagnosis. I can belong to the tragedy without being the author of it. Second exit. Stop bargaining with the past and start negotiating with your future. Hyperbolic discounting, the brain's tendency to prioritize immediate emotional relief over long-term reality, shows up here as rumination. Because replaying the moment gives you a temporary illusion of control. It feels like doing something, even though it's just burning fuel in place. Instead, redirect that energy into future-facing safeguards that don't pretend you can control everything, but do improve your odds. Attention hygiene. Driving without the phone within reach. Walking slower near crosswalks. Teaching your nervous system that prevention is a practice, not a guarantee. This is not penance. It's design. A commitment device for your future self. Not because you deserve to suffer, but because you've learned something expensive and you're refusing to waste it. Third exit. Build a private ritual that honors consequence without inventing guilt. Humans need ritual. The system knows this. That's why courts feel like temples. Formal language, special rooms, rules of speech, symbolic gestures. We like ceremonies because they make chaos feel containable. But you don't need a judge to do a ritual. You can write a letter you never send. You can light a candle and sit in silence for 10 minutes, not as punishment, but as acknowledgement. You can donate time or money to something that protects kids, traffic safety, community programs, whatever fits the reality. You can turn the pain into a boundary in the world, something that makes it less likely to happen again. That's not erasing the stain, that's turning the stain into a map. Because the stain isn't proof you're evil, it's proof you're awake. You're on a dating app, swiping through faces like a bored emperor. You ghost someone because it's easier than being honest. 2 weeks later you see a post, they're thriving, new relationship, smiling. You feel nothing. Then another time you ghost someone and they message you. Not angry, just small, like you punctured something soft. Suddenly you feel like a villain. Same behavior, different outcome. And your moral brain lights up because it's wired to respond to consequences more than principles. Now imagine that on the scale of a life and death event. Of course your system floods with guilt. Of course it does. You're not broken. You're human. So back to the 2 drivers. Who's worse? The one who hits the kid even if they did everything right. The one who didn't even if they were careless? Your first instinct will be to answer with consequences. Your second instinct will be to answer with control. But the real answer, the one that destabilizes the whole moral courtroom in your head, is that worse might be the wrong category. Because moral luck doesn't just mess with justice. It exposes what justice is secretly doing. Justice is not only about what people deserve. Justice is also about how terrified we are of a world where tragedy can pick anyone. So, here's the haunting question I want you stuck with. The one that doesn't let you scroll away clean. If the outcome had flipped, and the universe had chosen you as the driver who couldn't stop, Would you want to be judged by your character or by your catastrophe?